we engaged over 200 employees and leaders, as well as outside consultants to help us develop the people strategy that will actually ensure that we are able to empower people and enhance culture. And empower people and enhance culture is one of the critical success factors that is going to allow us to positively impact 1 billion people by 2030.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. This is Ben Eubanks, your host. I'm really glad you're here with us today. Looking forward to a great conversation talking about connecting people strategy with business strategy, talking about probably some total rewards and comp things in there as well. And I'm so excited to have Marjorie Williamson here with me from RTI. She is an amazing leader. I had a chance to meet her last year at Unleash and have kind of followed her ever since. And finally I said, hey, let's get together on podcast, talk about some things that are important to you. And so I'm really glad she said yes. Marjorie, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Ben. So I am Marjorie Williamson, and I lead Global Total Rewards and HR Operations at RTI International. I am really happy to be here. I'll take a minute, Ben, if it's okay, and tell you all what RTI International is, because one of our challenges is that we aren't well known, and that's something we're actually working on. So RTI is an independent nonprofit research institute. We have over 6,000 employees, and we operate in over 60 countries. We've been around since 1908-ish, and we were the first presence in RTP, which is Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. We have had employees who have been here almost as long as the organization has, which is pretty exciting. And we have recently gone through some changes that I'll describe to you as we go through.
Wonderful. I'm excited to have you here with me. I'm excited to hear more about what you and the team are doing there. I know you have some big visions, some big ideas and things. And again, the thing that most excited me was we hear all the time that HR's got to know the business. We've got to understand what they're doing. And I'm really hoping today we'll hear how you and your team are trying to align with that, because it'll give everybody else some ideas on how they can do that with their own leadership. And hopefully some good questions today to get into. How do we do that better? How does other people follow in your footsteps? All of that good stuff. So you've done a really good job of kind of setting the stage there. So I think let's dive right into it. Let's talk about that. How are you thinking about this? What's the you have a name for this strategy. What's it called again?
It's the North Star.
Okay.
And it's the North Star goal.
Okay.
And what our goal is to positively impact the well-being of over 1 billion people by 2030, which is a big and ambitious goal. And our mission is to improve the human condition by turning knowledge into practice. And what that means is that I work with a lot of really brilliant researchers, international development experts, and other amazing talent that is required to bring this mission to life.
That's incredible. I love that. So let's talk about that a little bit, because that's it's almost like breathtaking when you said that out loud, 1 billion people. How do we take something that's that big and that's that future focused and make that practical and tangible today within your talent practices or within the organization overall?
Yeah, so we have had some pretty significant discussions with senior leaders, and RTI recently last fall brought in all of our senior leaders, so our top 100, to have a meeting. For the first time, RTI did that last November in order to roll out the North Star goal to all of our senior leaders so that we can then cascade that to our employees so that people really understand it. There was also an effort that we did where we asked employees, how do you impact? How can you see yourself impacting our North Star strategy, North Star goal? And so people could go online and put in how they personally and directly impact that, which was really exciting. And if I think about some of the things that RTI does, we do international development work. For example, we've worked in Africa and Asia in global health, education, wildlife preservation, energy and governance, among other things. We have a clinical research organization whose clients are biotech and pharma. We are working in the social, statistical, environmental sciences. So we do health, including public health economics, behavioral health, child and adolescent research, and it goes on and on. In fact, we have a really interesting business unit that's called Innovation Advisors. And as an example, one of the things they recently did was they partnered with Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing. They came to RTI and asked us to help them find small manufacturers to pilot a new automation project. So it helped them win a grant and expand their program to serve more manufacturers. So as you can see, the work we do is prolific, right? It's just all over the place. So it is sometimes hard to get your arms around what are we doing? And so this North Star strategy accounts for all that good work that we do throughout the world.
I want to go back for a second. You talked about this top 100 thing that the team did for the first time ever. What was the energy like? What was the energy like in that room with this group together for the first time, kind of seeing each other face to face, and then probably meeting for the first time in person? What was that like?
I think you used the right word. It was energetic. People were excited. You'll hear our CEO talk about that event. I mean, there were hugs, people who had been working together for over 3 years who had never met because of COVID, for example. So it was just really vibrant. And we spent a couple of days together. And in the mornings, we spent time with cross-functional teams. And in the afternoons, we spent time with teams that we work with on a regular basis. So in the morning, I was with our head of data science for our social, statistical, and environmental sciences business unit, and other people in very different worlds than I'm operating in. And then in the afternoon, I spent time with my colleagues in HR and global real estate and other areas. So we had different opportunities to discuss what we were able to impact through the North Star. We also talked at that time about what we're calling One RTI. And as you hear, we have a lot of different business units, and sometimes we've operated in a more siloed environment. And what I'm seeing now is us cooperating and collaborating to a greater extent. In fact, we have some goals this year that we haven't seen in the past really visibly that are cross business unit. So that's pretty exciting. And that is coming out of that senior leadership meeting.
That seems like that would be a natural extension, like you're saying, of this bigger strategy of how we are trying to go and serve the world as a company overall. We can't be doing that with a bunch of individual little pieces because it's going to be hard to get the impact, right? There's a synergy, there's a value of cross-pollinating ideas, like you're talking about in those different groups, like the things you're talking to someone who's in data science, like we can get some ideas for our team. We probably can get them some ideas as well for what works over there. So that piece of it, but just having some big picture things that we all agree on, we're going to go that direction and we all have this goal that cuts across. It doesn't matter if we're in research, if we're whatever else, like all the amazing things that RTI is doing, cutting across all those things. It feels like that's an important next step from here's the big vision to here's some goals we all are going to be pursuing as groups and teams.
Exactly. And then one of the big things that came out of this too was the need for us to have a people strategy. So RTI has had what I would consider to be a human resources strategy where we tracked our goals, we looked at our KPIs, and it was an HR strategy that HR tracked and followed. But we didn't have what I would consider to be a true people strategy that the whole organization will own. So instead of an HR strategy, we now have a people strategy, and there were a whole lot of folks that worked on developing that. And it really is going to take us implementing this people strategy in order for us to get to the North Star. And the thing about this is that we have some things where we're saying that our goal is ambitious and visionary. And in order to do that, we engaged over 200 employees and leaders, as well as outside consultants to help us develop the people strategy that will actually ensure that we are able to empower people and enhance culture. And empower people and enhance culture is one of the critical success factors that is going to allow us to positively impact 1 billion people by 2030. And as a result of that, we stepped back and said we really need a strategy in order to help our employees be empowered and to have the culture that we as an organization want to have. So we actually identified a resource to help us with this, to give us a high-level roadmap. And that resource was actually Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumelt. I don't know if you've read that, Ben.
I don't think I have.
Well, it's dense, but it's very informative. And what we were able to do is we actually start with, there are 3 phases to developing this strategy. Rumelt goes into all the things that will tell you this is a bad strategy, as well as the things that tell you it's a good strategy. And part of the good strategy is not only the what, but the how and the why. And so we began this process over a year ago. to develop this people strategy.
It's really neat. I'm trying to flip back in my notes really quickly because there was so good strategy, bad strategy. There's a book recommendation for anyone that wants to dig deeper into that bigger concept. I was trying to look back because there was one I read a few years ago. I was like, it's not that title, something close. It was, I Have a Strategy. No, You Don't is the title of the book. And it's illustrated. So it's kind of like a comic, it's like a Dilbert version of people trying to figure out what a strategy really is and trying to make that very clear to people that most of us say, oh, I've got this thing. And yeah, that's a good plan, but it's not a strategy because it's missing these elements, or you're not thinking through this lens of it or whatever else. Can I ask you a question? You said something a minute ago that I think was really insightful. And I want to, you skipped right through it like it was just commonplace. And I want to come back to it because I think it's important for people to hear this. You talked about, we have this HR strategy, and that's probably something that HR has designed and put together and owns. But you said this people strategy is something the organization owns more broadly. Would you talk about that distinction, what that means, and kind of how you see that?
So our HR strategy that we had previously was good, and it actually gave us guideposts, and it helped the HR organization understand where we were going and what was important for us to deliver to the organization, because HR is a support group. And so it helped us there. And we had key performance indicators, or KPIs, that we tracked. We had goals on. So it would include things like we need to attract talent. So attract talent is still part of our people strategy, but instead of it being just the responsibility of HR, it's the responsibility of the whole organization.
Perfect.
Yes. So attracting talent and improving our brand is actually kind of one of the first things that we will do. And that came out of a whole series of processes that we went through. So the people strategy began with a diagnosis, and we had to develop the areas, or what I call the pillars, that we were going to diagnose, because there's a whole lot out there we could diagnose. What we landed on were 5 things. It was culture and employee experience, which everyone's talking about, employer value proposition and brand recognition, which I mentioned early on. We don't have a lot of brand recognition, and we're working on that. The strategic workforce planning, because as we know, the workforce is changing. The future is unknown, but we know it's coming quickly. There's digital transformation and digital acceleration, truly. And then we're talking about workplace of the future. And that work is actually around teleworkers and what our facilities are like. And so we have our head of global real estate on this team. And then employee well-being. So those were our 5 pillars. And we started with a very simple question that was really, what's going on here? So, and I actually have some thoughts. I was thinking as I drove in today about when I went into diagnostic, and I have to say, I was not responsible for all these diagnostics. There were a lot of people, as I mentioned, 200 people, my colleagues in HR, my peers, my boss, who's the head of HR, who really was the facilitator of all of this happening. So it's important that I'm not talking about just me here. And I thought about, though, in diagnosis, right? So we're a research institute, we're scientific, we're data-based. So we go in with a hypothesis, right? Don't you go in with a hypothesis? And then sometimes what you do is you try to prove your hypothesis, or you try to disprove your hypothesis. And I thought about this. I think one of the successful things that these teams did was they went in curious. Let's just see what we find. Let's not start necessarily with a hypothesis. Like, it's hard to do. And well-being is one of the areas that I lead. And so it was really hard not to do that, because I did have a hypothesis. And actually, we found that the hypothesis was correct. But that's not the point. The point is going in curious and saying, if we're truly doing a diagnosis to understand what's going on here, it's important to go in objectively and with an open and curious mind.
That was beautiful. Wonderful answer. So one of the things that I know that you had mentioned to me is that the team is actually using this thing called a culture and organizational health dashboard. Talk about what that is and what the intent of that is.
Yeah. So I have a director of data analytics and HR analytics who reports to me, and she is really, really deep in this and a brilliant player in this field. So I have to call out Michelle Bigham for all the amazing work she has done on this. We started not knowing where to go. But this is actually a CEO initiative. So it's an initiative that our board is looking toward our CEO, Tim Gable, to present to them. And it's a way of us measuring and an early detection system. So we started off not knowing at all where we were going to go with it, but knowing that we wanted to be able to measure culture and organizational health. I will say at the beginning, we were doing a thing, and my boss will recognize himself in this, of boiling the ocean. So throw the kitchen sink in there. Let's get all the measures. Let's find all the data we can find. We're a research institute. We love data. We love facts, right? And so it was a process. It's been a process, and we're still in the process. So I will say today is like a journal entry for me. If we're thinking about Lewis and Clark, this is like my journal entry. So we're not all the way there. We're on our way. And what we said was, we know this culture and organizational health dashboard won't be perfect at the get-go. And we met with our CEO and my boss, the CHRO, and we had a conversation about that we need to allow this to evolve. Some of the measures in the culture and organizational health dashboard include things like client centricity. And client centricity is one of our goals. So measuring it and developing a system to do that is one of our goals this year, actually on our short-term incentive plan. So it's not done. So we have to present this culture and organizational health dashboard this summer or early fall, but that won't be finished. So we have to go into it knowing that we're going to evolve. And at RTI, we have a statement that says, learn as we go, adapt as we learn. And so that's our approach here.
I was going to say it's probably in the DNA of the company as researchers saying, we just found out that thing we thought was true is not true anymore. And that's okay. At least now we know the truth and we can proceed based on that knowledge instead of just blindly hoping for the best. And so I think I was hoping that was going to come out in the conversation. That's the way that you're actually adopting and adapting into some of these new approaches is we're going to start here, but the finish may look very different product. And that's okay. Because as long as we're getting to that goal we're shooting for, that's what the ultimate hope is there. So I'd love that. I love that.
Well, and I will add, Ben, it's hard for some of us, right? So we go into this thinking, okay, it needs to be 100% right off the bat. We don't want to send anything to the board that's not perfect, right? And so it's been an education and a learning and development process for me, for folks on my team, for really the whole HR and the broader organization to say, okay, is the Pareto 80% good enough? And I guess I don't remember who quoted this, but don't allow perfect to get in the way of good.
Yes.
And so we have to remind ourselves of that all the time.
Yes. One of the ways that I put it for when I talk to friends in the space, like we're trying to do this thing and they say, if it's not right, someone's going to judge me or judge my team. And from the very beginning, you have to say, this is a process improvement exercise. This is not a Marjorie is putting her career on the line for this thing. This is a process improvement thing. And we're going to get some things right and some things not right. And we're going to learn from that and adapt. It's worse if you say, no, I'm committing to one path, right or wrong. I'll commit to that. Just hold on to it, to my fingers. Was it pride from a cold dead hand? That's one thing. But to say, we're starting this, we're holding it loosely because we know that it's not what it's going to ultimately look like. I think that's really powerful as just a reminder for everybody else out there that's trying to start and get it perfect. You'll keep like waiting for one more thing. There's one more data point I need. And it ends up being a procrastination technique more than an actual, I'm going to solve this problem. And you may never quite get to the starting line with that sort of approach.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So goodness, I'm loving this so much. Would you be okay if I swap us over to a separate track in the conversation and talk about some of the things that, again, you talked about total rewards, the key part of what you do. It's when I heard you share last year on the panel, Annalise, you were bringing some of those ideas to the forefront of how RTI is really focusing on that and helping to make things possible for their workforce. So I'd love to ask you a couple of questions in that vein. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So it's like asking a kid if they want some candy. Yes, please. Let's go for it.
There you go.
So let's just take a second and talk about this because you've talked about some of the bigger picture things like strategy. You talked about these organizational level, you talked about people strategy, and I'm pretty much sure you also have this strategy for comp and total rewards, how you're using these things to influence the behavior of your entire workforce, how you're trying to reward them and compensate them. Would you talk about how you inform that strategy? Because part of it is top down, like what we want to drive. And part of that is employee up saying, here's what we're looking for. Would you talk about how those two things kind of meet, if you don't mind?
Well, thanks. So it is kind of like candy. So a few years ago, I guess it's about 7 or 8 now, we began a journey of doing total rewards surveys for our employees. And it's actually a total rewards optimization survey. So employees answer some general questions on the front end where they rank things like of our total rewards, all of our total rewards, what's most important to you. And then they rank what keeps them at RTI. And I'll intersperse an interesting fact here. Our number one retention driver at the last survey we did, which was actually in 2022, so kind of in the middle of COVID, but our number one retention driver was flexibility. Of course, employees valued base pay first and then maybe 401k or medical when they ranked what they value. But the reason they're staying is because we are flexible. And another little interesting fact is that I'm just speaking about our RTP campus. Before COVID, we had 2,600 people coming to campus, and we have 11 buildings. After COVID, 35% of our population is what we call resident, and 65% are hybrid or teleworker. And so hybrid means you come to work less than 2 days a week. So resident is 3 days a week or more. And so you can see how the organization has evolved. I know so many organizations that are dealing with this. And so we took that total reward survey and that input, and it helps us validate where our existing strategy is. So we built the first strategy when we did the first total rewards optimization survey. And we built the strategy based on that. And essentially, it's pretty simple, which is RTI will do what is prevailing practice or better in the countries in which we operate. So we're in 60 countries, right? And we can't do, unfortunately, we're actually more than 60, and we can't do a total reward survey globally, unfortunately, at this point, because total rewards vary so greatly throughout the world. And this survey has a conjoint piece to it where you're essentially asking people, what's your preference? It's like when you go to the eye doctor and they say, do you prefer A or B? And you say B, and they say, okay, do you prefer B or C? And so that's what a conjoint survey question is. And so what it does is it's a smart survey that as you go through, it helps refine what questions you get asked. And so in the end, what we come out with is, okay, here are the preferences that employees have. We break it down by demographics. We're able to look at by generation, by race and gender, by whether someone's in an employee resource group or not. So we look at lots of different demographics, and it helps us understand what's important to employees, and it helps us make trade-offs. So I'll give you a very simple example. In the US, our employees would prefer to have higher premium rates on medical than higher copays. Seems really simple, and it is, I guess. So when we have higher costs that are coming our way, and we're saying, okay, we are asking employees to share in some of those higher costs, then we know where to increase rates. So it's in premiums and not in copays. So it helps drive decision-making for us and helps us ensure that we have compelling benefits, for example, that we're paying competitively, along with all the other work that the great Total Rewards team here does as far as benchmarking and all that. This tool helps us assess and begin with what is important to our employees.
I love that so much. The research nerd in me, when you said conjoint analysis, my heart's fluttering in the best way over here. I'm loving this. That was actually a really great example of how I was like, we're going to have to explain the conjoint piece if she does it. And you did a great explanation of that for the eye doctor, because I think everybody can probably identify with that at some point. So that, oh goodness, that was so good. When you start to see this data come back on things like flexibility is a big priority for employees, do you start to socialize that through leadership? Hey, managers, when you're working with your people, listening to a conversation that comes up, or when we're talking about employer brand earlier, we're talking about our brand and our employer value proposition. Do we make sure and flag that for people that are potential candidates out there? Does it come back around full circle and start informing those kinds of things?
So it hasn't come full circle, Ben. It's come, 3/8, 5/8. I don't know. You might want to cut that. Let's say 75%. I don't know. So it hasn't come full circle into incorporating into our employer brand. We did that early on, but we are, as part of our people strategy, we are revising and really reinventing our employee brand and our employer brand. And so we do, of course, this with our executives. We start with our executive leadership team to share with them the outcomes. We share it with the members of our compensation and strategic talent committee. And then we do employee information sessions. So we share with all of the employees who not just participated, which, by the way, we have a very high participation rate, you can imagine, because we do survey research. So people are excited about surveys here. And so our participation rate is almost 80%. So we do employee information sessions and we tell them what they told us. And then we from there, we develop kind of what our 3-year plan will be. And sometimes the 3-year plan comes to fruition. And of course, as an organization, we have to balance kind of affordability with having compelling benefits and being able to attract and retain talent and have folks be engaged and ensure their well-being, which if we have time, I'll tell you about kind of the dilemma we're in with well-being. But so we do roll that out and we do share that information with employees. And I think that they see what we do that is a result of their input.
Being that transparent with it is powerful. I didn't even expect to hear that from that. That's amazing, because a lot of companies out there, a lot of HR leaders like, now that we've got it, there's some sort of burden to do something with it. And what I've found to be true is what you're saying there. Even if we say, listen, you asked for the moon, we have to balance all these things. What we can do is ABC. And for people to say, you heard me, like you're being honest and open with me, and you're telling me how far you can go, there's a lot of value to that. Even if you can't say, well, here's exactly what you asked for. There's a lot of value to saying, I heard you, and we're going to do our very best to meet what those needs are that you have. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, I found that to be true. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Goodness. I want to ask you 40 more questions. I feel like we could just go on and on. This is the best time, but I've heard too much candy is not good for you. Maybe that's a good metaphor for us to bring that one to a close. So if people have listened to this, they're really, as I am, they are enamored with your passion for this and really for leading and being an amazing HR and total rewards leader. Would you be okay with if they reached out to you on LinkedIn to connect or follow you?
I absolutely hope they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure and get that link into the show notes so anyone can reach out to Marjorie from there. My friend, thank you so much. This has been a joy, and I've just loved having you on the show.
I enjoyed it too, Ben, and I'll see you at World at Work.
Oh, yes, we'll be at World at Work. Yes, both of us will be. If anyone out there is going to be at World at Work, look us up. We'll be there. Again, you can ping us on LinkedIn. We'd love to see you at the event, and obviously come see us. Marjorie's session is going to be incredible. You hear more about the RTI story and how they're bringing these things to life. You'll see some visuals this time, not just hearing it through your ear pods or whatever else. And to everybody else out there, I hope you got some good notes, some good ideas from the conversation today. We got some great direction and ideas from Marjorie on how to really think about our strategy iteratively, not as this thing is going to be perfect right off the bat. So I got some good notes. I hope you did as well. Stay tuned. We'll catch you again next time on We're Only Human. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.